Hey guys, in this video I wanted to talk about the other side of the relation between uh, rasas and doshas. In another video I talk about kind of how I think the presence of hot and cold receptors in other areas of the body besides just the gustatory system um, kind of helped inspire the ideas of the doshas and their connection with the rasas. The argument in that video is that there's lots of reasons to think that these TRPV family receptors are actually repurposed from biological mechanisms that trigger rather broad homeostatic responses to stressors like heat and cold. One of the other most basic types of homeostasis that needs to be maintained is, of course, glucose homeostasis. And so this very early receptor family is repurposed everywhere. Another thing is chemosensory detection of undesirable chemicals, which normally means random chemicals. Around 90, well over 90% of randomly selected chemicals are bitter, although not many dietary chemicals are, because it kind of detects anything unrecognized. But yeah, these we'll get in a second to the role of these GR1 sweet receptors and T2ASR bitter receptors, which have actually existed for a very long time, do a lot of things. But these relationships are not as strong as with TRPV in terms of how much they've been researched. But so going back to the notion of vata, which is essentially metabolism increasing, function rate increasing, and kind of is found by a combination of bitter and cold rasa. I already described why a cold rasa would be associated with metabolic effects to some extent. But the notion of bitter rasa, in other words, plants that hit the T2ASR receptor potentially having post-digestive effects. What is this associated with? Well, interestingly enough, bittering agents, when they're administered, are, not all the time, but very, very frequently, cardiac stimulants. Lots of plant poisons, in fact, are like this. Some of them have to be gluconated, actually, to prevent the effects. But rather interestingly, in addition to this, there's a very high percentage of them are immune stimulants. Now, I'm going indirectly off the documented effects of what the most bitter substances do, because there's not direct, for example, T2ASR receptors do exist in the heart. They're thought to play some role in heart rate regulation. It's not a well-researched subject because it's very rarely researched. But when we look at bitter as a heuristic, chemicals that fit this shape actually do tend to be both cardiac and immune stimulant, which is quite interesting. In fact, it's the immune stimulant effects are well documented, although the cardiac stimulant effects are not, and are just kind of imputed from what the world's bitter substances tend to do. For example, although you do have some that reduce heart rate and stuff like that. But in terms of how strong, by contrast, the effect is on immune system, that's actually one of the original roles of these receptors. You've got to remember they're used for a long time before they're used in taste, and they're used to detect the undesirable. They're used on cell surfaces to detect viruses. They're used in the nose to detect what should not enter. And viruses actually have to manipulate and turn off these receptors. So, in terms of why this is, once again, the body leans on the side of caution. So, things that can't be recognized as having a specific nutritional value, chemical purpose, stuff like this. A lot of them just automatically trigger metabolism, immune system to some extent, get eliminated, things like this. And it's a very common strategy in traditional herbal medicine, not just Chinese herbal medicine, but even European herbal medicine. Herbal medicine, where bitters were originally administered not as a cocktail ingredient, but as a cure for things like cold and flu. So, yeah, it's a quite interesting, type of heuristic. And these beta receptors are actually everywhere. For example, they're found in kind of the gut, where at kind of the gut blood barrier, they detect things to be eliminated. They're found at the blood-brain barrier similarly, although there's not very much research on this. But so the concept of Vata fits quite well with this, where it's combining kind of, two stimulatory rasas that are heuristics for two stimulatory aspects. Now, the associations of GR1 sweep receptors are even less researched, but it is in fact known that they sometimes mediate entry of desirable chemicals. I'm not joking about this. Viruses manipulate the receptors to get in through the nose, is the most well-known case, and even an Ayurvedic remedy, Gymnestra sylvestre, tends to function by blocking viral manipulation of these receptors, although the original evidence for this manipulation has nothing to do with herbal medicine. It hasn't been researched much in this context. And it would be interesting to see. I'm just imputing kind of bitter cardiac stimulant. It would be interesting to see if potentially things that trigger organ GR1 receptors in the heart do the opposite and kind of slow down, because this is expected based on the necessary homeostasis functions, where when we have more calories and nutrients, we slow down metabolic processes. When they're lacking, we speed them up. But this is not a very well researched subject, But then you have especially the sweet aspect is not well researched, but it's partly things like sugar and stuff like that. Lots of things that trigger the sweet receptors on the tongue don't seem to trigger them elsewhere in a lot of organ systems directly. It's harder, perhaps, to find things that target, but watch my other video too if you want context on kind of a more established type of connection and analogy.